Hi everyone. It's Amy Barron. I'm calling you. I'm figuring out settings. And let's see if I can get this lighting correct. I am looking forward to. Here we go. I'm looking forward to having Elie and Gila from Yesh Tikva come and join me in a few minutes. This is the beginning of a really wonderful series, which I'm hoping to bring to all of you. I can't wait. I have so many guests lined up, and I am thrilled to be starting to have these kinds of conversations with all of you. I know that I'm just fixing the light here to make it so it's a little bit less shiny. Let's see if I can do that. We'll try like this. Basically, what I want to do with all of you is have these kinds of conversations where we talk about different aspects of fertility, about communal stigma, about what different communities are experiencing in their own lives and in their own locations. And I'm just so excited to bring this series to you, and I can't wait. So let's get started. So Elie, when you're ready, please come on and let me know that you're here so we can jump in. This is super exciting for me. We actually, Elie and Gila and I did a test run about 4 different times. Here she is, and I'm thrilled that she is here, and I'm thrilled that they're all here. Here she is. Elie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for joining me. But just by way of introduction, let me get started here. So my papers are a little bit gone, but anyway, by way of introduction, Elie is one of the co-founders of Yesh Tikva, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know her through my work at Nechama Comfort, and also personally, as we've been at different occasions together and had different speaking engagements. We've definitely joined forces in a number of different items, and I'm so thrilled to bring her here. Please introduce yourselves, being that I can't find the bio right now. I'm just human, so we'll go with that.
So my name is Elie Salomon, and I am one of the co-founders of Yesh Tikva, which is an organization that helps support Jewish people facing infertility. My own personal journey with infertility started when I was a television producer working for Martha Stewart, which was the best place that I could have been going through it, because I was honing my research skills to sit in front of Martha Stewart and go over her script with her.
Wow.
And it just made me want to research everything. So one of the things that I found was most important about my own personal journey was being my own best advocate and utilizing everything that was out there, articles, fertility forums, as they were called back then.
Right. What years are we talking about now? Because this is
2009.
the real advent of social media-ish.
Yeah, so it was 2009. I found something called like Fertility Community that had like little threads based on whether you were going through an IUI in the month of February or, a frozen transfer. And
I actually think I was on, I don't know if it was that one or it was something similar, but I remember that they had monthly chats where every person who was going through some sort of treatment that month, you could hop on and all of you could have like the 2-week week together, and
right.
It was really great.
And then when it didn't work out, you like jumped on to the next month.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And when it finally worked, you were like actually down, you had started with like 50 people and you were down to like 5 people who were due within, the same week as you. And honestly, these people were like my community. It was different because I was the only Jewish person of these 5 people, and I would have to explain to them, oh, this Jewish holiday is coming up, and you guys don't get it, but it's big about kids for this reason. And they kept saying to me, like, every holiday you have is about kids. And I'm like, yeah. And you just don't, they didn't get it. But like, these people are still my people. We're friends on Facebook. I watch their children grow up. And I know, like, these strangers that I've never met in real life, like their kids, I know their story from preconception, from injection, that we just like, we go through all these things together. And it's funny because, you know, back then it was really taboo. I love your taboo talks. But it really was taboo to talk about it, because everybody and people who are going through infertility can understand, you see it as a fault, like it's something wrong with you.
Absolutely.
And, you know, it just, I was on this, and I was, you know, checking out, oh, what are these other things that you could do to make your, I don't know, to make more eggs, or to get you to day 5 or whatever it was. And there was an instance where I was very public about what I was going through. I just have a big mouth.
Even in your own personal life, you were public.
Yeah, I mean, like, once I had my first, I sort of had like reached over the side, and people were like, oh, he's so cute, he's adorable. And I'm like, oh my God, if you knew what I went through. And then I would just talk about it. And I remember I was living in the city with my husband before we had our first, and we'd bought our house in New Jersey, and we'd given ourselves a year to find the perfect house. Right. We assumed that we were going to get pregnant right away, and the house would be the thing that would wait. And there was this beautiful home in central New Jersey sitting there waiting for a family to move into it, because our doctors were in the city, we were on the west side, the doctors were on the east side, and I was not willing to move without that baby. And when our friends found out that we had bought a house, they were like, oh, are you pregnant? And I was like, actually, no. Wow. But when we moved to New Jersey and I had my first, I was very open to my community about what I was going through. And somebody had said to me, are you willing to talk to somebody else who seems to be going through it? And I said, yeah, absolutely. You know, give her my number. And she told me the person's name, and the woman never called me. And then it just so happened that that woman came to my shul like on Shabbos, and someone introduced us, and I'm like, oh, you were supposed to call me. And she's like, I was. And I said, yeah, this person was going to give you my number. And at the time I was pregnant with my second. Right. And I'm like, yeah, about infertility. I'm like, this one, you know, it's crazy journey.
Random conversation in the middle of shul.
Well, we were like in the kiddush room, actually, like in between the coat room and the kiddush room. And she said to me, you know, like, I don't have a problem getting pregnant. I have a problem retaining my pregnancy. But I'm going to maternal fetal medicine at Robert Wood Johnson next week. And I'm thinking to myself, maternal fetal medicine is where you go once you have a high-risk pregnancy, not before you get there. And I said that to her, and she kind of gave me this look like, oh, you think you know everything. And I said to her, you know, well, what happens? And she said, well, I kind of like 6 weeks or 7 weeks in, I bleed out. And I said, you know, I was just reading on this fertility community thing that I was reading about people who have it's called like a blood clot disorder, and they take blood thinners as soon as they get pregnant. And I said, you know, just think about that. And she's like, okay, I'm going to my maternal fetal medicine appointment. And 2 weeks later, she comes back and she says to me, you were right, MFM was not for me. They were like, come back to us when you get pregnant. And when I'm going to go to my next fertility appointment or my OB, I'll bring it up. And we actually shared an OBGYN, and he laughs at me all the time because I was just this crazy researcher. And she said to him, you know, what do you think about going on blood thinners? And he's like, oh, that's very, where'd you come up with that? She's like, oh, this woman, Elie Salomon. And he starts laughing, and he goes, of course, like our layman researcher.
Right. Right. So you were this researcher from way back when, and you harnessed that because that was part of your personality and also part of your job. And then you harnessed that to do everything you could to advocate for yourself for your own journey.
Right.
So tell me, like, obviously I'm going to speak to Gila as well in this call, but tell me now how the two of you, and along with, I know there are 2 other women also, how the 4 of you sort of came together and understood what the need was in the community, and then how you founded Yesh Tikva.
So I actually, because of my openness, I had run into an old camp counselor of mine, on Pesach in Florida, and she said to me, "Oh, your kids are so cute." And I said, "Oh, he's IUI, he's fresh IVF with PGD, and they're frozen IVF with PGD." And she was just like shocked that that was the way I was introducing my kids.
Probably her jaw was like,
yeah, and she was like, "Oh, that's really interesting." And like, it kind of took her back. And then I realized, like, oh, maybe she had gone through the journey as well. And we were talking, it was like at shul. Again, everything happens at shul. And then she was living in Queens at the time, and Gila was living in Queens at the time. And she said, Gila had called her, and she said, "I think I have like the right person for you, who's open about everything and just like speaks about it freely." So Gila called me on the phone and said, "We're thinking of starting this organization because there seems to be a lack in support for people who are not Hasidish. A lot of these organizations are open to any type of Jew that there is, but you know, you look at the websites and they just scream a different hashkafa maybe than all people." And I actually said to her, you know, "I don't think that there's a need. You know, there's this one and there's that one. And in fact, I'm going to be speaking for one of these organizations and telling my story in Washington Heights." And she said, "Yeah, that my sister is running that event." And so I said, "Okay, great, I'll meet you." And so we went to Washington Heights, and I spoke and gave my story. And then a woman from that organization got up and started speaking to the YU crowd and switched over into Yiddish and said to them, you know, "You all speak Yiddish." And they're all looking at each other like, we're YU, we're not Breuers. And Gila turns to me and she goes, "And this is why we need something for the rest of us."
Right. Look, and I want to just be very clear. We all know and love. I mean, you're talking about A Time, I believe, and we all know and love.
No, I'm talking about Boni Olam, which does fantastic work that nobody has been able to replicate.
Correct. So
and A Time is definitely out there, but like I had never heard of A Time until I was sitting in the Cornell doctor's office, and I was like, "Oh, it's not for me," because I was reading through the stories and they just didn't resonate with me.
Right. Look, so I want to say that this, you know, this platform that I've tried to build here is a platform that I want everyone to feel comfortable with, and that it is my mission to make sure that every person finds the organization and finds the support that they need. And so whether it doesn't matter where you fall on the Jewish spectrum, there are organizations out there that really speak to you. And Bonei Olam and A Time are absolutely incredible organizations on the ground doing fantastic work, extremely important work, and help hundreds and hundreds of families on a yearly basis. But they because of the origins, the founders of the organization, they specifically, it's not that they align themselves with a specific hashkafa, it's that visibly they look as if they sort of fall in a certain hashkafa, and that sometimes can be off-putting for people who are coming at it from a different way. And so it sounds like, yeah, go ahead.
And it doesn't mean that, like, you know, I only go for support with Yesh Tikva. Yep. I mean, I know plenty of people who they find their support with Yesh Tikva and A Time, and you know, there's serial support group people, which is amazing. If you're if only once a month you can get support from this organization and you need it more than once, utilize everything that's out there.
Exactly. And I will, just as a plug for later on, I am having A Time and Bonei Olam also come on and do lives with me, and they can talk more about their work as well. So I wanted to, again, to clarify, we're talking now about Yesh Tikva, but it was clearly born out of a need that the community wasn't being addressed from a different hashkafa. So continue on.
Yeah, and the other thing is that, like, what we aim to do is to get away from being embarrassed by infertility and making it more like, not like a household name, but like the rabbis should always be thinking is this speech going to trigger somebody? I shouldn't from the pulpit wish a happy Mother's Day to all the mothers that are out there. And it's more like we have Infertility Awareness Shabbat that we do so we've had it for 3 years now. It's usually the Shabbos or two before Pesach, because Pesach is a time when it's all about Vihigata to Lebincha, and somebody who does not have children, telling the story of Passover is critical, telling the story over to your children. And the Rambam Maimonides talks about, like, even if you don't have children, you're still required to tell over the story. So people who do not have children are still thought of by the rabbis as being a part of the story. So our aim is to bring about a sensitivity and awareness towards infertility around that time that might be very triggering to people.
And it's been an incredible program from my perspective, hearing about it from when I was working to Nechama Comfort, but how communities all across the world have adopted this, Yesh Tikva Infertility Awareness Shabbos, and have run programs, have had their heads of their clergy get up and in front of the pulpit, on the pulpit, and speak about it. They've had different women or different families speak about their own personal stories. So it's really been a huge success and done so much to really foster this sense of community that these families won't feel alone. I guess my question to you is, so there have already been, and I'm asking this a little bit tongue in cheek, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So there have already been 3 infertility awareness Shabbats. So do we need more? I mean, do we need to keep doing this on a yearly basis? Does the community, the community already knows about infertility? Do we need to keep doing this?
Well, unfortunately, every year, people get married and 1 in 8 couples experience infertility. So you're never gonna, unfortunately, run out of people who it touches. And, you could be, I remember having the conversation with one of these 55 and older communities in Florida. And they're like, really, do we need to be doing this? And I said, you don't realize that there are people sitting there who are dying to be grandparents, and they're just waiting for their child. They don't know how to support their own daughter or son. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. So because, people are still making those ridiculous comments to people like, oh, are you expecting, what are you waiting for? Your career shouldn't be the important thing. Like, nobody knows what's going on in anybody else's bedroom. And it's really nobody's, point. Yeah, it's nobody's business.
Right.
And unlike me, I'm willing to share and give back maybe sometimes a snide remark. But it's always good to have a reminder, because even if it's just once a year, the community needs that reminder. And it also validates people who are going through the struggle, saying, we hear you, we're there for you, you're a part of us and we're sensitive to you.
Right. And I think also from my perspective, and you and I have talked about this, and Gila also has talked about this as well, I'm currently not struggling. My family is complete. But having those moments where I can reflect upon my journey, it is still extremely emotional for me. And even though I do this work on a daily basis, it's to have a specific time where the community comes together and acknowledges it sort of from on high, I think is a very powerful statement that we give over. And this awareness Shabbos that you've created is absolutely incredible and still very relevant and still very necessary.
I mean, I'm 5 years out of the journey. My family is also, thank God, complete. But every Simchat Torah during Kol Ha'Na'arim, I remember, when all the kids would gather underneath the talis, that I would walk out. Like, I honestly could not bear it. And I think it was 2 years ago.
I actually couldn't go to shul on those years that I was struggling. I actually never went to shul on Simchat Torah. It was like I couldn't even be there.
Right. So I remember as a single, I didn't want to go Simplest Store because it was like a singles fest and it was too much pressure. And then when I was struggling to have a kid, I would like force myself to go to shul to get out. But like when that would come up, I would have to like go to the bathroom or whatever it was. But 2 years ago, we created the fertility prayer, which is a prayer for others. So that, you know, if you're holding the card, no one's saying, oh, that person is struggling with infertility. It's like a communal prayer. And my shul still does it every Simchas Torah, and the rabbi gets up and he says something before we say it. There was a specific woman that in my community, an older woman who's a grandmother, and she stood next to me one year, and I was reading it, and I don't know what happened that I just started to cry, and she put her arm around me. And there I was, like watching my kids with my husband on the other side. There was no reason for me to be crying, but it brings it all back. And I'm like, you know, thank you for giving me what I have, but please help those who are feeling this way now. And I just feel like these are important ways in which the community can try and understand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Elie, thank you so much for being here. I'm incredibly grateful for you for sharing your story and giving us a little bit more about Yesh Tikva and its origins and its programming. I'm going to have you hop off now and then have Gila hop on, and then we'll continue with Gila.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you. Okay, so as Gila hops off, here she is. So she's now gone. So I just want to, Gila's going to hop on in 1 second, but I just want to go over with all of you the fact that these situations, these programs that Yesh Tikva has created and here Gila comes, as for communities, for people to come together. Okay, Gila, try again. For some reason that didn't work. Try again. Let's try that. So I just think that these are very powerful programs. Hi, Gila.
Hello.
I'm just talking about how powerful these programs are that all of you have created at Yesh Tikva, so that as a community, we can do it's not only one person talking to one person or one family member supporting one family member. It's as a community, we can recognize that these issues exist and also that we can do our best to support people who are in need without sort of being overt with it. And the fertility prayer is just so brilliant in its creation, and the fact that you give them out freely to shuls for people to use, I think is absolutely incredible.
Thank you. And thank you for always being so supportive of the program. This is about, for all of us, this is about what all of us can do to help people. And I always hesitate when I see this, and I don't like to say it's my pleasure, because it means that I'm on some level taking pleasure from someone else's pain. But if I can do something to help someone, then that's what we're here for. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you. So there are a couple people who wrote in a few different things that they wanted us to address, and one of them I wanted to start with, and that spurred the conversation that you and I started having the other night. So this person wrote, what, quote, qualifies a person to be part of the infertility community? She says, this is a debate between my husband and myself. She had a successful first pregnancy, even though it took them 9 months to get pregnant as a 26-year-old supposedly healthy person. This was slightly concerning to her OB after 7 months passed trying for number 2. She did get pregnant a year and a half later, but then lost that pregnancy, unfortunately, and then couldn't get pregnant again and was told to do IUI, and it was successful, but then she also lost that pregnancy. So she's saying that the doctor said to her that they classified it as unexplained infertility, but they aren't sure why it's challenging for her body. And her husband keeps saying, well, like, what's your problem? You can get pregnant. So how is that infertility? So I just wanted to hear from you a little bit about, if you could speak to that a little bit. Definitely. Obviously not
any medical capacity.
Of course not.
Just,
from the emotional side.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just the definition that's out there for anyone to read is the ability to get pregnant and maintain a pregnancy to term and live birth. So in terms of just a definition that one could look up of infertility, that definitely would be something that she would fall under the category of. But emotionally, there is a category of infertility that has been coined circumstantial infertility by the Savvy Auntie. And the concept of it that she brought to light is that whether or not one receives a medical diagnosis of infertility, emotionally one can experience the feelings of infertility due to circumstances preventing one from having a child.
Wow. So that exactly would, I mean, that definition would certainly encompass this situation. And then potentially, I'm guessing that also encompasses people who can't get pregnant for other reasons, in that maybe that they have a mental illness and it's not good for them to get pregnant from a psychological basis. If financially they can't get pregnant, I mean, or they have a chronic illness that prevents them from getting pregnant. I guess that sort of circumstantial infertility that's meant to be sort of the catch-all. Is that right?
That's my understanding of how it's circumstances that are preventing one from who wants to have children, whether it is in the way in which it was coined, it's for individuals who are still looking to find their bashert and haven't found a spouse and are struggling with the emotions of infertility in addition to looking for a partner.
Right. So it also applies to the single community as well,
right.
is what you're saying. Right.
It's originated as.
It originated there. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with the Savvy Auntie.
I'm not actually. You know what? If you tell me again.
Yeah, I'll send you all her info.
Okay, yeah, send me the info and I can post it also on the page afterwards so people can look it up. Okay, let me do one more and then I want to talk to you about something else afterwards. But so this one person wrote, this was sort of in reference to a number of the stories that I was sharing, said, thank you for the shares. Thank you for all the stories. They're really inspirational and encouraging. I do wonder, though, if you have any stories in line that don't necessarily have a happy ending or an ending in general, for that matter, that she'd love to hear about those that are still suffering but still manage to stay strong. And then I'll sort of like combine that with this other one, which said that, and I get these kinds of messages all day long, but this person was saying that she's close to the end of the 2-week wait and she's feeling really yicky and like very weepy, and she's worried it didn't stick. It's her first IUI after 5 cycles and she had 2 partial molar pregnancies. It's been 3.5 years and she just doesn't want to be sad and depressed anymore. So do people like talk about this? Like when you're running your groups and you're getting these individuals who are either in the peer-to-peer counselor mode where you're doing that training, or when you're having programs or people are coming to you, what do you say to these kinds of people who are still they're not at the end and they don't know how the end is going to end?
That's a really hard question to answer. I don't know that there necessarily is a right answer. I think it's on an individual basis. I definitely think that being part of a support network where you can relate to others who are going through a similar experience and they can give you tips, advice on things that work for them, whether it is finding a moment within that day in which you can focus on something else and live in it, and through mindfulness or through other, we've heard of people who make sure to take multiple date nights throughout the 2-week wait, so that the focus, even though you are thinking about it at the time, and it's very hard not to be, finding that minute, that half hour, that hour, or whatever it is, to not be focused primarily on that, but finding something enjoyable, pleasurable to you and your spouse, so that within that there is moments of support, solace, hope,
Yes.
and being able, there are those who believe that if you during the 2-week wait, thinking that you're pregnant and being able to appreciate that during that time and living in that moment is also a way to get through it.
Wow.
It's
Wow,
not
that's pretty
less
amazing.
disappointing when a cycle fails, whether you thought you were pregnant or tried to suppress those thoughts. It's disappointing regardless. So if
Very good point.
well, yeah, so if you're an individual who could and will appreciate living in that moment of saying, today I'm going to think positively about this, and that to you is supportive emotionally, then there's no reason not to.
Right. There, it's interesting. There's an account that I follow who's commented on a couple of my things called Fertile Affirmations, I believe it is. I can also tag it afterwards. And they on her handle, she talks all about these affirmations that one can make on a daily basis to really, yes, practically speaking, at some point the 2-week wait will end, and practically speaking, you will get a blood test and you will know whether you're pregnant or whether you're not pregnant. But you have the choice in those 2 weeks to either turn your mind negatively and think what if, and maybe almost think the worst, because then if the worst happens, then you've already sort of steeled yourself against it, and then it's not so terrible, which is, as you just said, obviously ridiculous, because it's going to be terrible anyway. Or you can think positively about it and try to live more in the moment. It's exactly what you were just saying. So she does a lot of this on her page, which I find really wonderful.
Yeah, and on that note, there's also a wonderful book that Alice Domar put out. She is a mental health professional who has pioneered in the field of mental health and infertility for many years. And she put out a book, and I'll send you the name of it to post.
Okay,
but
great.
It's a mindfulness through infertility book. And personally, it, for me, helped me on my journey turn around my my perception of the 2-week wait and survive it instead of falling into the depressive cycle that I was falling into.
Can you, I mean, yes, I'll put that up afterwards. Thank you. Can you give us a little bit about your story and how you came into Yesh Tikva? Because it sounds like Elie was sort of out there, but you already had the idea. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. It started actually 3 years into my personal journey. And a little bit of the impetus for yesterday's question was our conversation. We posted a question yesterday in our story asking how long it takes people on average to ask for the support that they need or to seek the support. And I'm someone that took 3 years to get there. Though I know that most people around me knew I was going through infertility, I was never able to give it a name. I couldn't speak about it with anyone. And for 3 years, I lived in my own depression, stopping to go see my friends, not stopping to get invited because I pulled myself back, living in a community where everyone, it was a young community. We lived in Washington Heights. It felt like everyone was having a child every other day. The mommy meal emails came in on a daily basis. And I even at one point thought, like, maybe if I made mommy meals for everyone that, even if I didn't know them, in that spot, I would be able to have a child.
Right. Like something in the water. So therefore, if I do something, then yeah.
It's the lack of control in the process that,
totally.
Like, if you can grab onto something.
Totally.
Yes. I stopped long before I ended up having my first miracle.
Sure.
But it definitely, the grasping onto something until I realized that what I really needed was the support, and being surrounded by other women and a community that understood what it meant to be the only one of my friends who didn't yet have a child 4 years into my marriage. So I was connected through Dr. Pelkovitz with this incredible woman that then connected me to Elie. And we then were further connected to two other incredible women. And together, the 5 of us sat and brainstormed and tried to figure out a way that we can take either our personal or our professional, because it was a combination of individuals who've experienced it,
Right.
individuals who came to it professionally,
Right.
to take those experiences and support others. And it started with a little support group around my dining room table, my own personal support group that really got me through the worst year of my own fertility journey. And then it grew, and over the last 5 years has become a national organization, and we're on to our 5th infertility awareness Shabbat.
Right, which is pretty amazing, and clearly, I mean, is really, it's hitting a need in the community that didn't exist before. It's not that it's hitting a need that didn't exist before. The need was there, but it's addressing this need that hadn't been addressed before is really the better way to say that.
Definitely, but we're hoping that over time it'll continue to further address it. On the one hand, it's incredible that so many fertility organizations exist today and so many people are talking about it, but on the other hand, not that much has changed in the last 5 years in terms of people being ready to seek the support that they need, because it still is so taboo. And it's still something that we're sometimes fighting with rabbis to speak about it. Or to speak about it repeatedly, as you were talking with Elie about. That unless someone has experienced it, it's very hard to fully understand what that means. And that's a big part, I think, of the work that we're doing in our educational end of it is allowing those who haven't experienced it to have a window into what it's like to be a man or a woman facing infertility in a Jewish community that is so child-centered that on a weekly basis, you walk into shul, and many shuls, the first thing you see are strollers. Just being able to pass into a place that for some may be very spiritually uplifting during their journey becomes a place they need to avoid because it's so triggering.
Right.
And
yes, it's shul and social settings, bar mitzvahs and weddings. I mean, you know, it's everyone is asking, everyone is always talking about, so, you know, how are you? You know, you're catching up. How's your family? And then it's, so do you have any kids, or how old are your kids? And immediately it's, you know, the triggers just keep coming at you from right and left. And it's very, very difficult in our community to sort of sidestep all of that.
Yeah.
And what all of you are doing is just giving us the support that we need. I want to ask you one more thing before we start to close. When we were talking the other day, you were talking about your support groups, about how you normally make them a 4-week support group, and you do that by design, that it's only a certain number of weeks. And there are other organizations, hospital-based or faith-based, that have support groups for infertility that are longer. And so I just wanted you to speak about that piece and tell me why you chose to have a shorter length of time for your groups.
For sure. I think it stems from everything we've been talking about so far. It's this taboo that exists around infertility, but it's also the hope that we try to hold on to, saying that I'm not going to need it for that long, and therefore I'm not going to sign up for the support, because hopefully I won't need it. And then what do I do if I'm in the middle of it and I get pregnant? And the hope is very important. We need to hold on to the hope, because without it, why would we try again? The hope is that for everyone, and we pray for this, and we earnestly want it for every person going through infertility, is that they shouldn't need our services. And that one day we could close down because no one needs Yesh Tikva.
That is my most fervent desire every day.
For sure. And it should be answered quickly, and we should be
speedily and amen. Yes.
Yeah. But in the meantime, being able to seek that support, even while holding on to the hope, actually helps you hold on to that hope. It's the community holds you through that time, and increases your feeling of belonging, of being heard, of being seen, in a space where you're safe, where no one is judging, no one who doesn't understand what you're going through is going to say you're being too sensitive, or be grateful for what you have, or at least blank, at least it's not cancer, or at least it's not. And the reality is, no, it's not at least. It's real, it's painful, it's traumatizing, and everyone deserves to receive the support, and for there to be individuals who hold space for that pain, for the joy when it comes, and for everything.
Right, and I also think that there's one other piece of it, where that you know, once you do get pregnant, and God willing, all of you will get pregnant when you want to, when it's the right time. But once you do get pregnant, it's not as if the trauma of infertility goes away. So I've had discussions, I don't know what the policy is in your group, but I've had discussions with other organizations that run support groups for infertility. And the question always is, well, if one of the clients gets pregnant, well, then what? And are they still allowed to get the support? And every group makes a decision that works for them. But I know that some organizations decide that, yes, that not only is it encouraging for the other members of the group to see families where they've been able to get pregnant, but that those families themselves are still suffering that trauma of infertility, and they still need the support of the group. Others say no, that it can be too triggering, and that it's better if then they go into a pregnancy group, even a pregnancy after infertility group. And that's also, you know, very relevant and appropriate. But I think every organization sort of addresses that differently. But, you know, I don't know how Yesh Tikva does it.
It's a case-by-case basis. It depends on the individual. It depends on the group. It definitely is not we don't have a clause for that. We work with each individual as, and we've had to do very positive light. And it depends. It's comfortable still being in it, because it could be very triggering also to hear about the loss while you're trying to hold on to some semblance of hope 100%. Through your. And there was that article recently that was shared on Facebook. And I'm blanking on the name, but talking about the PTSD of infertility, and that it can trail long past that pregnancy and into one's life. So it definitely is important, as you were saying, to have the support, whether one is in the throes of cycle or pregnant post-infertility or parenting post-infertility. It definitely is something, and something that a lot of us bury deep down after we have a success, and something that a lot of people don't realize, that having a child is not healing, it just ends a cycle. And then after the cycle, you need to go through the healing process for that PTSD.
Yes. So in closing, someone just asked on the feed here, they asked if Yesh Tikva exists in Israel, or if only you have branches currently only in the United States.
At the support services that we offer are only in the United States, but all our resources that are available online are available to anyone. We are open to speaking with anyone and help guide them to resources closer to them. As well as Infertility Awareness Shabbat, we do partner with organizations in Israel, so it is a national awareness initiative. Amazing.
Okay, I just want to thank the two of you, Gila and Elie. Thank you both for being here and having this conversation with me. This is only the beginning of a conversation. This is a lifelong and passion project for all of us, and this is the work that we do. So we have these kinds of conversations all day long, and maybe we'll have to do a part 2, because clearly there's so much more to be said. But in the meantime, I just wanted to thank you and to thank Elie so much for coming on here. And if anyone has any questions for Elie or for myself afterwards, you can always message the I Was Supposed to Have a Baby site. You can DM there, or you can DM Elie by her personal page, or you can DM me at Yesh Tikva on their page, and they will answer any questions for you there. Thank you again, both. And this video we are working on, and this video that we're working on and that we're doing right now will be saved up on the I Was Supposed to Have a Baby YouTube channel. So it will go live here for 24 hours, and then afterwards will be saved so anyone can watch it forever. Thank you again, Elie and Gila.